Investing in safer communities. Before President Biden came into office, the country had just seen the biggest increase in the murder rate on record. President Biden and Vice President Harris moved swiftly to turn that around. President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan, which helped over 1,000 state, city, and county governments to invest over $15 billion in public safety, one of the largest one-time commitments of federal resources for state and local law enforcement and public safety on record. To put more officers on the street, avoid cuts to police budgets, and employ more technologies that reduce crime. 3 decades ago, then Senator Biden was one of the original creators of the COPS program, which among other things has helped to put 136,000 more cops in police departments nationwide to ensure accountable community policing. Funding for the COPS office increased by 72% since 2020, going from $386 million to $665 million. In 2023, the Department of Justice provided state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement agencies, research institutions, and nonprofit organizations nearly $5.8 billion to advance public safety. Those grants included more than $200 million to fund 1,730 new police officers in nearly 400 communities. The Department of Justice's 2023 grant funding also included more than $173 million in site-based funding to improve school safety. In 2024, the Justice Department awarded $4 billion through 3,800 different grants to support public safety and community justice activities in the states and territories and in local and tribal communities. Under the President's leadership, federal agencies also worked quickly to expand partnerships with state and local police to tackle violent crimes. The U.S. Marshals Service worked closely with non-federal law enforcement partners to apprehend more than 10,000 fugitives, including more than 1,000 charged with homicide. Gun violence prevention. President Biden and Vice President Harris took more executive action to get illegal guns off of our streets and firearms out of dangerous hands than any administration in history. This included signing into law the most significant gun violence prevention legislation in nearly 30 years. The bipartisan Safer Communities Act included the first ever federal gun trafficking and straw purchasing law, which allowed the Department of Justice to charge more than 600 defendants. A broadened definition of who must become a licensed dealer and run background checks before selling guns. Enhanced background checks for gun purchasers under the age of 21, which has already helped stop the transfer of firearms to prohibited persons under 21 nearly 1,000 times. The biggest ever one-time investment in youth mental health through the Department of Education to support students with a range of mental health needs, including the trauma resulting from gun violence, by helping to train or hire roughly 16,000 mental health professionals for schools. In addition to signing comprehensive legislation, President Biden and his administration took more executive action to reduce gun crime than any other president has. 2023, President Biden established the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention to accelerate his work to reduce gun crime and other forms of gun violence. After hearing from law enforcement that they were increasingly finding ghost guns at crime scenes, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives issued a final rule to rein in the proliferation of unserialized firearms. The administration launched the first ever federally funded campaign to encourage safe firearms storage. Last year, President Biden announced additional actions to combat machine gun conversion devices and to improve school-based active shooter drills. Safe, accountable policing. President Biden signed and implemented an historic executive order to advance police reform. The executive order required that federal law enforcement agencies ban chokeholds, strengthen use of force policies, restrict no-knock warrants, and direct other measures to advance effective, accountable policing that increases public safety. The Department of Justice launched the first ever federal law enforcement misconduct database covering the nearly 150,000 federal officers. Federal agencies have conducted thousands of checks to identify potential misconduct before making critical decisions about hiring, promotions, and officer assignments. The administration also encouraged state and local agencies to expand their use of a state and local misconduct registry that is currently in place in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Since May 2023, the number of registry users has increased almost 75%, and the number of records in the database has increased almost 85%. President Biden continued to call on Congress to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act to advance accountability, transparency, and public trust in law enforcement. Violence against women and girls. Working to end gender-based violence has been a cornerstone of President Biden's and Vice President Harris's careers, and the administration made significant progress in reducing violence and supporting survivors. Between 1993 and 2022, annual domestic violence rates dropped by 67%, and the rate of rapes and sexual assaults declined by 56%. President Biden signed the Violence Against Women Act, Reauthorization Act of 2022, and increased funding for VAWA programs by over 35% since 2021. President Biden narrowed the boyfriend loophole to help keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers, implemented historic reforms to strengthen the military justice system's response to sexual violence, invested nearly $1 billion in supplemental funding for domestic violence and sexual assault services, issued an historic memorandum increasing accountability for conflict-related sexual violence, issued the first ever national plan on gender-based violence to combat this scourge at home, and updated the U.S. strategy to prevent and respond to gender-based violence globally. The administration has also addressed online harassment and abuse, including by establishing the President's White House Task Force to address online harassment and abuse, funding the first ever national helpline to provide 24/7 support and specialized services for victims of the non-consensual distribution of intimate images, and training law enforcement on cybercrimes against individuals and provisions in the VAWA Reauthorization Act of 2022. The administration convened a global partnership for action to address gender-based online harassment and abuse, and announced voluntary commitments from AI model developers and data providers to reduce AI-generated image-based sexual abuse. Cybersecurity and cyber threats. The President set the first ever cybersecurity requirements for the operation of critical infrastructure, including airports, airlines, railways, pipelines, ports, and healthcare systems, and ensured owners and operators receive warning and information to fight cyber attacks. The administration worked with leading technology companies to launch programs offering free cybersecurity technology and training for underserved constituencies, such as over 1,800 rural hospitals and over 9,000 small school districts. President Biden and his administration launched the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark program, a labeling program to encourage companies to build internet-connected household devices, from baby monitors to home security systems, that meet high-threshold cybersecurity standards for American consumers. The administration responded to nation-state ransomware and other cyber threats by executing disruption operations, sanctioning cyber actors and facilitators, seizing illicitly obtained cryptocurrency, and other law enforcement actions in collaboration with allies and partners. President Biden issued 2 groundbreaking cybersecurity extensive orders to strengthen the nation's cybersecurity in the face of persistent state and non-state malicious cyber activity. The first established first-ever cybersecurity standards for software development were applied to all federal procurement and established the Cyber Safety Review Board to assess major cyber incidents. The second ensures accountability and transparency for software and cloud service providers, improves the security of federal communications and counter-fraud measures, drives use of artificial intelligence for cybersecurity, and lowers the bar to sanction adversaries in cyberspace. The administration drove historic initiatives to improve security and innovation in emergent technologies such as AI and post-quantum cryptography, reinforcing U.S. leadership in technological innovation. President Biden improved access to and management of radio frequency spectrum critical to applications such as mobile devices and smart factories via the National Spectrum Strategy, and issued the first ever sweeping executive order for ensuring responsible development and innovation in digital assets. Biosafety and biosecurity. President Biden took a number of key steps to protect Americans from biological risks. The administration released a new policy for oversight of biological research, marking a major new step in modernizing biorisk management. This policy streamlines and expands oversight of research of concern across the entire federal government, setting a new global standard for effective research oversight. The administration introduced a new framework for biotechnology safeguards on federally funded purchases of synthetic DNA and RNA. These safeguards make it more difficult for malicious actors to access and weaponize synthetic biology. President Biden took the most significant federal action any president has ever taken to protect Americans' data security. His executive order on preventing access to America's bulk sensitive personal data and United States government-related data by countries of concern stops the large-scale transfer of sensitive personal data, which includes intimate insights into Americans' health, location, and finances. The executive order, as well as the rulemaking that followed, protects Americans' sensitive data, including genomic data from malicious actors who may seek to use sensitive personal data to develop AI capabilities and algorithms that are detrimental to U.S. national security. Next, I'll do another video and we'll pick it up at disaster response.